The Australian outback stretches wider than the imagination can hold, a place where the horizon is a straight line carved into the earth, where silence rules, and where a single stretch of asphalt can run hundreds of kilometers without interruption. Travelers call it beautiful. Survivors call it haunting. On the night of July 14, 2001, this desert landscape swallowed a man whole. His name was Peter Falconio, a 28-year-old British backpacker exploring Australia with his girlfriend, Joanne Lees. That night, along a lonely stretch of the Stewart Highway near Barrow Creek, Northern Territory, the desert stopped being a backdrop for adventure. It became the stage for a nightmare. By dawn, Peter would vanish forever. No body, no trace. Nothing but questions that claw at the imagination to this day. And Joanne would crawl out of the shadows, traumatized, trembling, and whispering words that chilled police and locals alike. He's gone. He's dead. He shot my boyfriend. This is not just a true crime story. This is a horror tale stitched from reality, a mystery drenched in blood, silence, and the burning sands of the outback. Peter Falconio and Joanne Lees were young, vibrant, and restless with wanderlust. Hailing from Britain, they set off to explore the vast, wild landscapes of Australia. It was supposed to be the trip of a lifetime. Two lovers, a camper van, endless roads, and nothing but the horizon calling their names. Peter, born in Huddersfield, West Yorkshire, had an easy smile and adventurous spirit. Joanne, from Huddersfield as well, was fiercely independent, quick-witted, and eager to drink in the world's beauty. Together, they had already seen much of the country before their van rolled into the Northern Territory. That territory is unlike anywhere else in the world. The heat presses against your skin like a brand. At night, the stars blaze brighter than in any city. But that beauty is deceptive. For all its wonder, the outback is merciless. It hides predators, both animal and human. On the evening of July 14, 2001, Peter and Joanne drove north along the Stewart Highway in their orange Volkswagen Combi van. The sun had long sunk, leaving only the smear of headlights and the cool, whispering desert wind. They weren't far from Barrow Creek, a small roadhouse settlement barely noticeable in the endless wilderness. The couple chatted, music played, and laughter filled the combi. They had no way of knowing that another vehicle was stalking them. A white Toyota Land Cruiser loomed behind them, closing in, keeping its distance, then drawing nearer again, like a predator testing its prey. Joanne would later say that the Land Cruiser flashed its headlights. Peter slowed down, thinking perhaps something was wrong with the van. It was an innocent mistake, the kind any driver would make on a lonely road. But in the outback, mistakes can cost you everything. When Peter pulled over, the silence of the desert was broken only by the crunch of gravel under tires. The white Toyota stopped behind them. A tall man stepped out. His name, Joanne would later learn, was Bradley John Murdoch. Murdoch was no ordinary traveler. He was a drug runner, a violent man with a history of racist tattoos and a temper that flared like a match to gasoline. And on this night, he carried a gun. Approaching the van, Murdoch told Peter he'd seen sparks coming from their exhaust, offering to help. But within moments, his voice sharpened and everything shifted. Joanne would later recall the sudden explosion of violence, Murdoch forcing Peter to the side of the van. A struggle, raised voices, a gun. Then, silence. A single gunshot cracked through the night. Joanne's heart seized. She couldn't see Peter anymore. She couldn't hear him, but she knew. Deep inside, she knew. Murdoch turned on her next. He stormed to the passenger side, wrenching open the door. Joanne fought, kicking, scratching, screaming, but he was stronger. He tied her hands with homemade restraints, pressed the gun against her, and tried to force her into his vehicle. But Joanne wasn't done fighting. In the chaos, she twisted free. Adrenaline surged through her veins like fire. She ran, barefoot, bound, terrified, into the darkness of the outback. Imagine it. Miles and miles of desert scrub, the night air thick with fear, the sound of your own blood rushing in your ears. Behind you, a man with a gun, searching. Ahead of you, nothing but blackness. Joanne crouched in the sand, hiding behind bushes, trembling as Murdoch's footsteps drew near. He shone a flashlight across the scrub, calling out, searching for her. At one point, he passed so close she could hear his breathing. She stayed perfectly still, forcing her own breath to slow, even as her lungs screamed for air. Minutes stretched into hours. The desert was her only shield, its silence a coffin. Joanne stayed hidden for 5 excruciating hours, paralyzed by the thought that if she moved, he would find her. Finally, when the night began to break and the first hints of dawn colored the sky, Joanne rose from her hiding place and stumbled onto the highway. At last, headlights, a trucker, a savior. Shaking and hysterical, she flagged him down. Her words tumbled out in broken gasps. "Help me. He shot my boyfriend. He's gone. He's gone." The police were called. A manhunt began, and Peter Falconio was never seen again. The early morning of July 15th, 2001 brought chaos to a place where nothing ever happened. Barrow Creek was a settlement of little more than a roadhouse, a gas pump, and silence. Suddenly, its quiet was pierced by sirens, searchlights, and frantic radio chatter. When Joanne Lees stumbled into the arms of truck drivers who rushed her to safety, the authorities were alerted immediately. The Northern Territory Police launched a search along the Stewart Highway, fanning out across the endless sand and scrubland. They found the couple's Volkswagen Combi abandoned on the roadside. Inside, there was no Peter, but there were signs of a struggle, a smear of blood, later confirmed by DNA testing to be Peter Falconio's. But here's the twist. The police were not convinced at first. Joanne's account seemed too dramatic, too strange, too cinematic to be true. Some officers even whispered suspicions that she might have been involved in Peter's disappearance. After all, there was no body, no obvious killer, only her word. Still, the timeline was clear. Peter had vanished on the night of July 14th. By the morning of July 15th, a manhunt was underway. Helicopters buzzed overhead. Roadblocks went up along the Stewart Highway. Locals were questioned. Backpackers were stopped. Every white 4x4 in the region suddenly came under suspicion. But the desert is vast, and Murdoch had vanished into it like smoke. The haunting question emerged early. How do you find one man in a wilderness big enough to swallow entire cities? The horror of the Falconio case isn't only in the attack. It's in the details the investigators slowly pieced together, like fragments of a nightmare. First, the Volkswagen Combi. Police found blood on the vehicle, small but undeniable. That blood matched Peter Falconio. Proof that Joanne's story held truth. Then came the restraints. Joanne described the ties Murdoch used on her wrists, cable ties and homemade bindings. Police scoured the Combi and surrounding area, finding fibers that matched her description. Next, the desert itself gave up a clue. Tire tracks near the site of the ambush. Distinctive, heavy, belonging not to a van but to a larger vehicle, a Toyota Land Cruiser. But perhaps the most chilling piece of evidence was hidden in a place most killers overlook: clothing. Joanne's t-shirt carried traces of DNA that did not belong to her, nor to Peter. It belonged to Bradley John Murdoch. And then, as if fate itself intervened, a security camera hundreds of kilometers away at a truck stop in Alice Springs caught sight of a white Toyota Land Cruiser passing through the night. The driver, a tall, gaunt man with long hair. The time matched perfectly with Murdoch's movements. Piece by piece, the puzzle began to form, yet the horror only deepened. Despite all the evidence, the blood, the fibers, the DNA, there was still no body. And without Peter's body, doubt continued to gnaw at the edges of the case. The outback doesn't give back what it takes. To understand the fear this case inspires, you must understand the man at its center. Bradley John Murdoch was no drifter caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. He was a man with a past that read like the blueprint of a villain. Born in 1958 in Sydney, Murdoch grew up drifting between jobs, towns, and bad decisions. By the 1990s, he was deeply entrenched in the Northern Territory's criminal underworld. He trafficked drugs across vast stretches of highway, using the isolation of the desert as cover. He carried weapons. He carried grudges. Murdoch was known for his explosive temper. Friends and acquaintances described him as volatile, unpredictable, and dangerous. He wore tattoos associated with white supremacist groups, a swastika inked on his body, an ideology as toxic as the methamphetamine he smuggled. On the surface, he could appear calm, but beneath that surface there was violence waiting to erupt. And in the outback, Murdoch was comfortable. The endless roads were his hunting ground. He knew where to vanish, how to evade, and how to erase. When investigators zeroed in on him, witnesses came forward. Multiple people recalled seeing a vehicle like his on the night of July 14, 2001. Others remembered a man matching his description lurking near Alice Springs around the time of the crime. Still, Murdoch denied everything. He claimed he wasn't even in the area. He claimed Joanne was lying, that she fabricated her story. But the DNA didn't lie.
The more police dug, the more he looked like the boogeyman of the outback, an ordinary man with the heart of a predator. By 2003, 2 years had passed since the night Joanne Lees stumbled, terrified, out of the desert, screaming that her boyfriend had been taken. For much of that time, suspicion still hung in the air, not just over Bradley John Murdoch, but cruelly over Joanne herself. With no body, skeptics whispered theories that Joanne had fabricated parts of her story. But in 2003, DNA evidence cracked the case open. Forensic testing proved that Murdoch's DNA was on Joanne's clothing. A silent witness, invisible to the naked eye, had finally spoken. Police arrested Murdoch in South Australia in August 2003, charging him with the murder of Peter Falconio and the abduction of Joanne Lees. He pleaded not guilty. When the trial opened in October 2005 at the Northern Territory Supreme Court, the courtroom buzzed with tension. Journalists filled the seats, eager to broadcast every detail of the mystery that had gripped not only Australia, but the world. Joanne Lees took the stand. Years had passed, but the fear in her eyes was still fresh. She described the chilling encounter, Murdoch's calm voice, the gunshot, and the desperate chase into the outback scrub. The jury listened in silence as she relived her trauma. The prosecution presented its evidence. Blood in the van, confirmed as Peter Falconio's. Fibers from restraints, proving Joanne's story. DNA on her clothing, matching Murdoch beyond doubt. Eyewitness sightings of his Land Cruiser in the area that night. The defense fought back hard. They argued the DNA might have been contaminated. They painted Joanne as unreliable, suggesting inconsistencies in her story. They reminded the jury again and again, there was no body, no gun, no absolute proof Peter Falconio was dead. But as the trial dragged on for nearly 3 months, the evidence weighed heavily. Murdoch sat in the dock, expressionless, while the jury pieced together that the conviction of Murdoch brought justice, but not peace. The Falconio family, devastated, traveled from England to Australia, begging Murdoch to reveal where Peter's remains were hidden. He never spoke. To this day, Peter Falconio's body has never been found. The outback swallowed him whole. For Joanne Lees, survival was only the beginning of another trial. Life after trauma. She became a figure constantly scrutinized, with the media dissecting her behavior, her grief, even her refusal to smile. She returned to the UK and later wrote a book about her experience, determined to reclaim her story from the speculation and suspicion. Murdoch, meanwhile, languishes in prison. He has always maintained his innocence, appealing the verdict multiple times. Each appeal has been dismissed. Still, he offers no answers, no closure, no location of Peter's remains. The outback itself seems complicit. Vast, silent, indifferent. A wilderness where secrets can vanish forever, where one man can disappear without a trace, leaving behind only shadows and blood. And so, the legend of the Stewart Highway grew darker. Backpackers whispered warnings. Truck drivers told ghost stories. Even today, the stretch of road near Barrow Creek carries a reputation, not just for its isolation, but for the memory of that July night in 2001. The Stewart Highway stretches endlessly into the horizon, a scar through the heart of the outback. To drive it at night is to feel the land watching, alive with secrets. On July 14th, 2001, a young couple set out on an adventure. Only one returned. Peter Falconio vanished into the darkness, a body never recovered, a mystery never solved completely. Joanne Lees survived, her courage a testament to endurance, but also a reminder of the horror humans can unleash when the wilderness conspires to hide the evidence. Bradley John Murdoch sits behind bars, convicted, silenced by law, but unbroken in his refusal to tell the truth. Somewhere in that vast desert, Falconio's remains lie hidden, beneath red dust, among stone, or scattered